100% do not buy. And I'm going to tell you why, and I think you'll probably agree with me. It's a pretty good reason. The Intel Arc GPUs, they just came out for reviews yesterday, and they're going to be dropping on the same day as the NVIDIA RTX 4090. That's going to be October 12th. Now, I love GPUs, and I would love for there to be a third competitor in the market along with AMD and NVIDIA. But here is where the problem gets really serious. What Intel is doing, in my opinion, goes against the interests of gamers and enthusiasts everywhere, and it's actually going to do a lot more harm than it is good. If you see any of the reviews yesterday, you're going to see that they all had a lot of confusion and extremely mixed messages. This GPU launch is absolutely not ready at all. These were, of course, reviewer GPUs, but it's coming out next week. I don't think they're going to do too much to fix them next week. They should have just delayed these until they were actually decent. This is not an acceptable product to send out for people to have to, tinker with and have various issues. All of the problems reported on the reviews were actually very serious. Some games flat out wouldn't start at all. Even very, very popular games like Fortnite that a lot of people play and a lot of people that would be buying this class of GPU may play certainly was having a huge amount of issues. Various games would just freeze. Nothing really was working right at all. You could say, all right, if it was a brand new GPU company or a new company, you can give them a little bit of slack. Maybe they don't have that much, experience. But we're talking about Intel here, who is an absolutely massive company. They have thousands of engineers and employees. If AMD and NVIDIA, which have likely less employees, could actually put out fairly good products without these many issues, why can't Intel just put out a product that works with, drivers that work? They have the resources to get all of the good engineers from different companies. They've been getting a lot of money from the government as well with the CHIPS Act in order to, make more manufacturing. I mean, Intel Arc was something that we thought was going to be absolutely canceled, and it looks like it probably should have been, and it probably was canceled. First, let's set a baseline here for what a GPU should be. Let's take NVIDIA. I know that they do get a lot of criticism for their business practices. A lot of people don't like them, especially during the last 2 years, but you have to admit when it comes to their actual products, they're in fact pretty spectacular in many cases. Often they're definitely pushing the boundaries of performance, as we've seen with the 3090 Ti. The pricing may be a little bit too expensive and people have their own complaints. Let's separate that from the actual hardware. The drivers themselves, most of the time, they're pretty flawless. You rarely have issues with NVIDIA GPUs. That's why people buy them time and time again. AMD has also gotten significantly better. Most drivers now, you could say, are almost, on par with NVIDIA. Not in every single case. NVIDIA is still, of course, the leader in this sector, but you really can't fault NVIDIA for their software and the attention to detail that they do put in their driver implementations. AMD had this issue years ago. That's why a lot of people that maybe had like the 5700 XT, they were perhaps apprehensive to buy into RDNA 2 like the 6800 because they feared that they're going to have the same driver issues as in the past. Now, there were issues with AMD, but they seem to have fixed them, and a lot of people will say aging like fine wine for AMD. And while that may be true for AMD, I do not think that's going to apply to Intel. Going back to NVIDIA, if you ignore all of the criticism they get on the business practice front, the hardware and software is usually pretty on point. If you get a GPU, even on launch day, for the most part, it's going to work well. And when there are issues, they seem to have some updates fairly quickly within a few days, and it generally fixes the issues and we move on and nobody has any problems with that. So in that sense, that's impressive, and that's what actually should be going on in the market, because these companies have to respect your hard-earned money. If you buy an Intel Arc GPU, even if you're an enthusiast, do you really want to sit there for days on end trying to figure out what's going on with the software, trying to tinker, trying to see why isn't it working like any other GPU should? It's not like these GPUs are extremely cheap. Even though they come in at a decent price range, they're still fairly expensive. Their price to performance isn't really all that great, and that translates to also, in the games that it does work, extremely inconsistent performance. And some games it doesn't really seem to do much. In other games it performs way above its class, maybe even close to a 3070 or 3070 Ti. Sometimes at higher resolutions it seems to perform better. Lower resolutions not really, but then it doesn't work in some games. Anyway, any positives that it may have, and we would usually form an unbiased opinion, is something that gets thrown out the window when as a whole the GPU is just not ready. That's really my point here. It's not about giving a fair shot to Intel. I want them to succeed in the market, but this is not the way that you do it. If you release a problematic GPU for the first generation right away, people are going to be immediately thrown off by that GPU. Nobody's going to buy it. That means nobody's going to be using it to see the problems that arise, much less people as a user base, and you're going to have many less fixes going forward. They have to release a GPU that should work on the first day. That way, consumers will get it. They'll be very happy with the price they paid. Their games are working well. It's doing ray tracing. It's doing a lot of great things. The media is talking positively about it. When you even have many outlets being very, critical of Intel, regardless of if it should be in the market or not, it's really a serious problem, and it probably does more damage to the enthusiast base. Now, if this GPU continues to be this bad, eventually they're going to get out of the GPU game like we really thought they were, and that's probably their overall plan, because remember, these GPUs are competing with used GPUs, RTX 3000 on the market that are going to be a whole lot better. If you're going to spend $300 and something on a brand new Intel Arc, while remember, you might be able to get a 3070 or a 3070 Ti for very close to that price on the used market, and you're going to have significantly better performance across the board, more consistent, and it's not going to give you driver issues, and people know that it works. So you may risk buying a used GPU, but I'd rather do that and have something that's actually most likely going to work in the games that I want to play, rather than get a GPU that may be brand new, but the driver and software implementation is absolutely terrible. So that's why when somebody puts out a basically non-functioning product on the market this early, it doesn't really merit sort of an unbiased and give it a shot type of review. Even if we want a third competitor here, this is just going to make it worse for the GPU market. This is just going to give more power to NVIDIA and AMD when Intel eventually sort of goes out, because it's going to scare any other manufacturer from ever trying it again. If Intel, with its massive amount of resources, can't put a GPU together that just simply works, and we're not even talking about something that's really advanced. They're not trying to beat a 4090. They're not trying to have a crazy amount of ray tracing performance. They're having something that barely beats an RTX 3060, something from literally years ago, the mid-range GPU from years ago. We're not even talking about a 3080 or 3090 level performance here. We're talking about a very basic GPU that they can't even put together well for it to function on games that have been on the market for years. We're not talking about games that just came out and it's having glitches and different issues. We're talking about very popular games that have been in the mainstream for several years. So this is either nobody cares, or it's maybe really incompetence over there at Intel. I don't know what's going on in that GPU sector, but certainly it does not look very good at all. In my opinion, they should have just canceled it, because this type of performance and this type of inconsistency is not something that anybody really wants to see in the GPU market. We just have to see what's going to happen during the next few years. Now, you can think about an ideal path where maybe, they are going to do a lot of driver updates, and it will age like fine wine, and maybe a year from now these GPUs may work. By that time, it's going to be a 3060 competitor. By the time there's probably a 4060 out, which is going to be multitudes higher levels in performance, and not to mention the used prices are going to be even cheaper for an actual 3060. You might as well just buy a 3060 now, and you're going to have consistent performance for around the same price. So I don't really know what they're doing here, but Intel has made some really huge errors in the past. Look at the CPU enthusiast market. They let AMD pretty much run away with the show. Intel was just basically giving us very minor upgrades for years. Either nobody cared there, or they were just looking at it from a very sort of business perspective that really didn't make any business sense, because it killed all of the passion in that sort of enthusiast market. They've certainly done better during the last few years. 12th generation Alder Lake is a great platform, and the upcoming 13th generation looks like it's going to build upon that. Now, they're actually great features, great performance. They're really, impressively competitive with AMD on the CPU front. In my opinion, I think 13th generation may actually beat AMD finally, I think that one is actually going to be a great success for Intel. So they can definitely put out good products. That's why we have to look at this GPU division. I know they're probably separate, but they're going to have to do something because having such a miserable launch where reviewers have no idea what's going on with the GPU, mainstream games aren't working, a very basic 3060 level GPU is really unacceptable, and it's not fair to the gamer or the consumer. So they have to revamp these drivers immediately, maybe even postpone the launch, because when it gets to the frustrated hands of gamers and word continues to get out that these GPUs are not put together on the software side very well, it's going to be very disappointing. It looks like hardware wise, they may definitely have some great capabilities in certain games when they really ramp up, especially with ray tracing when they can, punch above their class. But if the software and driver implementation simply are not done to an adequate degree, we're not even talking about to a perfect degree or to NVIDIA's level, just an adequate, consistent basis, we're never going to see that hardware performance, and it's going to be frankly completely wasted. Now, we'd love to see a competitor for NVIDIA and AMD, but I don't think this is going to be the way to do it. NVIDIA is just going to release their 4090, have absolutely no competition from Intel. Hopefully AMD has something with RDNA 3. Hopefully performance, price, and their drivers are good. All right, guys, so let me know what you think about Intel Arc. My opinion, definitely don't buy. Something changes in the future, maybe, but as of right now, I don't really see that happening anytime soon. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.